good morning to you. Thank you for finding time to being with us today. The show is Unfiltered, and today we shall be looking at some of the top stories that are trending across the continent of Africa. But first, I'd like to bring us up to date with the latest headlines from newspapers from across the continent of Africa. We start with this from Kenya. The Daily Nation: loyalist top routers bloated CAS lineup. What austerity? President William Ruto added another burden to the taxpayers by increasing the number of nominees for the position of Chief Administrative Secretary from 23 to 50, creating the largest executive in recent history. The list comprises mainly politicians who lost in the general last elections. And story just down there: Raila, I won't be intimidated to call off this protest. And bombardments as operation intensifies. The government increased its firepower, including artillery, in 6 targeted counties from Monday. And then Telkom: Musheru Yatani summoned MPs investigating Uhuru's allies over 6 billion Kenya shillings acquisition of loss-making telecom private equity firm Hillions. And then that is what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation. The Star newspaper, still from Kenya: I'm under pressure to call off the demo. And then doctors harvest tongue flesh to repair girl's mouth. And SRC faults MPs for rejecting rules on salary review. Tragic end for woman who fled abusive marriage. That's what we have there. And the Standard newspaper: no lean government as 50 to join cabinet. Very well. The People Daily: poll losers, top list of Ruto's 50 CASs. And then Taifa Leo, that is our Kiswahili version of the Daily Nation: marafiki wala nyama, meaning the friends of close allies of President William Ruto who have benefited from this latest appointment. So that is what we have in some of the newspapers from across Kenya. So let's look at some from across the rest of Africa. The Citizen from Tanzania: Tanzania, India now to trade in own currency. That's what we have there. Let me just see if I can get us down to the subtitle there. Tanzania and India have reached an agreement that will no longer make the US dollar indispensable in trade between the countries, and transactions can be made using 2 countries' currencies. That's what we have there. And then JPM legacy lives on 2 years after his demise. Today marks the 2nd anniversary of the death of the late president of Tanzania, John Pombe Magufuli, and his legacy lives on. The Namibian, of course, from Namibia: Genob tackles unemployment by expanding civil service. How do you expand civil service as a means of tackling unemployment? And does the Namibian economy right now able to sustain this kind of wages, or are we able to come up with ideas and means by which we can perhaps work on creating an enabling environment where entrepreneurship can thrive, where local businesses can thrive, where local manufacturers' goods can be consumed and they can do well in the local economy? Those could be other ways that we could explore in terms of addressing the issue of unemployment. Sometimes just having a bloated, and probably this is not the case in Namibia, a bloated civil service that at the end of the day will be a burden to the taxpayer. It is counterproductive unless it's really necessary, but this is just a very small fraction of how that issue of unemployment can be tackled in Namibia. But I'm sure there are other ways, and not just in Namibia, but across Africa, there are other ways that governments can really engage and explore to see that we tackle the issue of unemployment that I think is rampant across board. But Namibian government has decided to expand the civil service, so hopefully it will not be a stretch for the taxpayer there. In Namibia, a news day from Tanzania, not from Tanzania, but from Zimbabwe. CCC rules out poll boycott. They're saying no matter what is happening, and of course they've been raising doubt about the preparedness of the Zimbabwe's electoral commission, and they're saying it doesn't matter these challenges and what we have to deal with. We are here to stay, and we shall not boycott the elections, and we will run it out until the end. We are here to go up to the 9-year. The Daily News also from Zimbabwe, period poverty is a huge issue as many women and girls are using sadza, cow dung, during menstruation. Okay, now that is something else. I don't even know what that first thing is, but okay. All right, the news. New Times. This is from Rwanda. Lawmakers push for ECDs at workplaces. So far, there are 49 ECDs providing daycare services in the workplace. Okay, that is in Rwanda. Rwanda is really making stride in certain things that we see only being advocated for a lot in the Western world. In Kenya, very few companies have places that accommodate women who might want to come to work, or parents, maybe their fathers who also would like to do that, to come with their children to work. And there are centers that looks like the early child development centers, that is, they've been equipped and, can really take care of these children, and the companies have hired qualified personnel to take care of these kids as the mothers get to working. Very few companies here in Kenya, very, very few. I could count them. I would not feel my my 5 fingers, but across some developed countries, there are also countries that this is something that they're advocating for, and I see now Rwanda is also trying to advance in this regard. So I guess that is really a good thing. The Daily Monitor from Uganda, Museveni to crush PDM cash thieves. That's it. 2 picked for Luwero Diocese seat, and prison's top chiefs shuffled. That is what we have on the front page of the Daily Monitor. The Sun from Namibia, Okuku by-election, who are these people? And then unemployed may turn into terrorist. That is the alarm that is being raised in perhaps the second last SONA, that is the State of the Nation address. The president boldly acknowledged that frustrated youths could easily be swayed into terrorism. So President Genob, what are you doing to, if someone else was just talking who was not in a capacity to perhaps influence policies and get to work and try to address these issues, I can understand if they get to complaining and viewing these issues and addressing them from the perspective that you are. But you are the head of state. So from where you're sitting, Namibians are looking for you for solutions, are looking up to you, government, to offer them solutions. So you can't be sounding like them, and you can't be raising this alarm. So what perhaps Namibians would like to hear you say is, we understand the issue of unemployment, and we understand certain factors that perhaps might push the young people to join these extremist groups, of course unemployment being one of them and others. But this is what my government is doing to help in solving this problem. Might not solve it 100%, but at least there are efforts that we've put in place that are gearing towards finding a lasting solution, and we've set the ball rolling even for the next administration to continue solving this problem of unemployment or other problems that perhaps your government has identified that could be a fueling concern for the young people there to join these groups. But just coming out and sounding the alarm, President, that is not enough. You should say this is the problem, the eminent problem that the country is facing, and this is what my administration has done so far to address it, or to attempt to address it, or these are the plans we have in continuing to address, because this is a continued problem. It's not, you can't have a one-off solution for it, but these are the efforts that we've put in place to try to find solutions, instead of just saying, this and this is happening, and we should be worried. Why? So what is the solution? The bloated civil service that you now want to have? I don't think so. Now the Nation from Nigeria, expect a competent cabinet, Tinubu assures Nigerians. Feels like he's having some jab on for his predecessor. Well, the case is still in court, but anyway, the president-elect But that sounds like a jab to President Buhari, who perhaps did not have a competent cabinet. And that is, you can see how that perhaps could be mirrored depending on where you're looking at and from what perspective you are analyzing performance of President Muhammadu Buhari, depending on which issue you pick to look at and how the government perhaps has handled that, you can make your own conclusions. But what from Nigerians have been saying, a lot of it is that perhaps President Buhari did not put people in place where people who knew what they're supposed to be doing, or people who were able to effectively implement the policies by the government and address effectively the issues through their ministries that the people of Nigeria would have wanted to be addressed. So maybe that is where Tinubu is coming from. And I don't know if it's just he's trying to maybe criticize or let us know that Buhari had incompetent people in place, but for him, he intends to do different and get people who are professionals and who are qualified and who can work better in serving the people of Nigeria. I guess that is what he's trying to say. I'm not sure. Now, The Nation, of course, the one I was reading up there, cash crisis, states reject CBN's partial compliance. And then AFDP, partners target 618 million US dollars, 6 million jobs for Nigerians. I still don't understand why there's a cash crisis in Nigeria. If the central bank was, the ruling from the court was that the older notes, the old bills are to be in circulation, what is the hesitancy? Why are they not releasing these notes back to the market? Because people are continuing to suffer. So you either release the older notes back to the market, or you make sure the new bills are available and are enough for circulation. There's no two ways about it, But I think releasing of the new bills perhaps would be a better option, because you don't want to negate all the hassle you had to go through in having the 70% of these bills go back to the central bank, and now you have to release them back to the market. It really does not make any sense at all, because the central bank spent a lot of money, employed a lot of extra people to help in sensitizing, to help in going down into the trenches and the villages and collecting this money and exchanging it. The older people who perhaps are not aware that these monies are being exchanged. So you used a lot of money. So I can understand why you're finding it difficult to release these old notes back to the market, because of how you had to go out of your way to have them with you. And now you should have made sure that the new currency, the new bills, not currency, the new bills are available. That is what you should have done, and you failed to do that. So you have created this mess. And if at all the country was not ready to transit into the usage of these new bills, you should have taken your time and gotten the politics out of it and had your ducks in a row and prepared. So by the time you're launching and you're giving these deadlines, you knew you should have done it, knowing well and good that you're able to effectively roll out this new currency distribution. That you have enough in the reserves, but now you don't have enough of that. It's not there. And then now you're being forced to return the older ones back to the market that you had struggled to bring to recover from the market. So it's very confusing there. And according to the court, Nigerians have been given up to the end of this year to continue using the older bills before they're fully recovered back back from the market. So it's just a lot of public wastage of money, if you can see the back and forth and what that will cost the taxpayer at the end of the day. And then on top of that, the scarcity is really affecting the trading there. So it is affecting Nigeria's economy in a very big way. So this is something that they need to work on and solve as quickly as possible. Presidency defends election integrity. That is the presidency, that is President Buhari. He's defending election integrity. Well, the case is in court right now, so I don't know why President Buhari will find it necessary or rather will be taken to court, because some issues have been raised about the credibility and how the process went on. So why would President Buhari come in and try to assure Nigerians that, these elections met the integrity test? Well, he wasn't on that ballot, of course. His candidate of the APC got declared as president-elect according to the votes. He garnered the majority of those votes. So I think when such a case is in court, I think the best that he can do as a statesman, President Buhari, is just be mum and let the law carry out its course, and let those who are going to go to challenge it, present their facts, and let the court system there do its work. And then after it has made its findings based on the facts that would have been presented in front of it, and then now you can talk about, you can come out and defend this election integrity. Otherwise, why are if it was that great, you don't have to defend it. Nigerians would have known about that, because they're the ones who went to vote. They're the ones who are waiting for this result. So if, it passed the integrity test and it was so great, Nigerians will be the judge of that. But even the observers noted some of the irregularities and some of the problems that were being encountered with the beavers. So it's not for you to say that the electoral process, passed the integrity test, and now you're defending the election integrity. That is not your place. Your place is to wait for the process to take its course, and for you now to just be patient there, waiting to see who you shall be handing over power to in the next inauguration. But for right now, as it stands, it is President-elect Tinubu, unless the case goes on and the court decides to rule otherwise. But in the meantime, I think it will be nice for you to just stay out of it. The Daily Trust, that is from Nigeria as well. Security operatives on red alert in states. Peace committee worried over violence, intimidation threats. Don't kill people you wanted to lead. That is what former President Jonathan is saying. And we will prosecute staff found compromising standards in that is according to Independent National Electoral Commission there. And then 17 die in Kano auto crash. Some sad news. And IPOB ranked world's 10th deadliest group. Okay, deadliest group as in, all right. And what other groups was it being ranked with? So that you'll find on the front page of the Daily Trust. And 4 feared killed in El Rufai's convoy Shiite clash. And how I will form my cabinet, Tinubu said that. A National Assembly leadership, why we are delaying zoning till after governorship polls. Nigerians are going to vote tomorrow for the governors there. And so hopefully this time things will be different and the machines will not experience those problems that was recorded in some of the voting centers. The Punch newspaper, also from Nigeria. Nigeria needs competence, not national unity government. Tinubu. All right, let me read that again to make sure that I'm not missing the point. Nigeria needs competence, not national unity government. Okay, so Tinubu insists religion, ethnicity won't influence appointments. Okay, a president-elect backs Supreme Court on Naira, says Atiku Obi's legal actions good for democracy. And then no going back on legal action, presidential election created tension. Okay, very well. So there you go. Now, leadership not by force. That is what former President Jonathan Goodluck is saying. And polls, Lagos, Kano, Rivers, governor candidates face tough battles. That is according to the latest polls. And threats ahead of Saturday's poll, worrisome. That is according to Abdul Salami. And 3 feared killed as party supporters clash in Lagos, Ogun, and Oyo. IPOB rejects 10th deadliest terror group ranking. So they've been ranked as a terrorist group. I don't know who was doing these rankings, and they're placed, IPOB is placed as number 10 on the deadliest groups we have in the world, which are considered to be terrorists. There is quite something there. And of course, IPOB, the Indigenous People of Biafra group, has been is proscribed in Nigeria. So they have, of course, rejected the leadership of IPOB, whose leader right now is still illegally in Nigeria's custody, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu. And I don't know if this will make things worse. And I don't know, by the current leadership we have in place there in Nigeria, will it make any difference as far as this case of Mr. Nnamdi Kanu is concerned, or such information would even make his fate worse? You tell me about it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on these findings and this ranking. Of course, as I've said, the leadership of IPOB has rejected those findings and that ranking, that it is the 10th most deadliest terrorist group in the world. Okay, so unions, I don't know if it's in the world or in Africa, but whichever, but they've rejected that. Unions protest airport concession and sue minister. That's also we have there. Let's look at some newspapers from the UK. NHS pay deal signals end to wave of public sector strikes, and then say yes to end strikes, that is on Metro. And then the Guardian, excoriating report condemns Met Police over racist, sexist culture. And then unions hail pay victory as Health Secretary raises offer. All right, and the Daily Telegraph, Labour's pension tax raid plan will hit millions. The Daily Express, victory for common sense and patience. It has, the way they've put it, you wonder, did it have to take them that long and for that many people to suffer for them to get some common sense? Because that's, if you were to go with that headline there, victory for common sense and the patience. Very well, so that is what we have on some of the leading newspapers from across the world. Let us have some news bulletin in detail, and then we shall pick on some few stories to look at, because we're looking at the top news stories from across the continent of Africa this day on the 17th of March 2022, and the show, of course, is Unfiltered. We start from Ghana. And Christian Atsu, the Ghanaian footballer who died after an earthquake hit Turkey, will be buried on Friday in his native Ghana. Atsu was found dead after the earthquake caused the collapse of his apartment in southern Turkey. He had been playing for the Hatayspor club. The state-assisted funeral will take place in the Ghanaian capital, Accra. Thousands of mourners and well-wishers from Ghana and abroad will fly and helped his side reach the 2015 African Cup of Nations final. The 31-year-old also played at four Premier League sides, Everton and Newcastle. Atsu will be remembered for his love for humanity and for supporting the underprivileged in the country. And we go to Uganda, where Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has accused Western countries of imposing gay rights on African nations as lawmakers in the country prepare to vote on an anti-LGBTQ bill. The bill, introduced earlier this month, proposes tougher penalties for same-sex relations in a country where homosexuality is already illegal. It has sparked criticism from human rights groups. In an address to Parliament on Thursday, President Museveni said Western threats of sanctions to African countries opposed to homosexuality were hypocritical because the West also has some very weird culture. For instance, President Museveni said the Western countries should stop wasting time of humanity by trying to impose their practices on other people. He continued to say that Europeans and other groups marry cousins and their near relatives. And here in Africa, or rather in Uganda, marrying in one's clan is a taboo and should they impose sanctions on them for marrying their relatives. He's asking, should Africa impose sanctions on Europeans for marrying their relatives, because also that, according to the African culture, is a taboo. So Mr. Museveni referred to gay people deviants and urged more debate on the matter. Under the proposed law, anyone who engages in same-sex activity or who identifies as LGBTQ could face up to 10 years in jail. Western governments and aid agencies working in Uganda are routinely accused of promoting homosexuality in the country and have repeatedly defended the LGBTQ community from attacks related to their identity. Uganda has not prosecuted anyone for consensual same-sex acts in recent years, despite the strict anti-gay laws. And I'll just move on swiftly to Libya. Armed forces in eastern Libya say they have found about 2.5 tons of uranium ore that was reported missing by the International Atomic Energy Agency. 10 drums containing the ore were found near the border with Chad, said the head of the forces media unit. The IAEA said it was actively working to verify the media reports. The agency sounded the alarm after a visit by its inspectors earlier this week to the undisclosed site. The area was not in government-controlled territory. Uranium is a naturally occurring element that can have nuclear-related uses. Only it has been refined or enriched. The uranium, which went missing, could not be made into a clear weapon in its current state, but could be used as a raw material for a nuclear weapon. Now, in December 2003, under then military ruler Muammar Gaddafi, Libya publicly denounced nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. And back to Uganda, where the son of Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has deleted a tweet announcing that he will be standing for the presidency in 2026. Muhoozi Kainerugaba, an army general, is notorious for his controversial tweets, which have led to diplomatic spurs and reprimands from his father, who sacked him as a commander of land forces last year for boasting about how easily it will be to invade Kenya's capital here, Nairobi. The tweeting general has also not hidden his ambition to take over the top job from his 78-year-old father, who has led Uganda since 1986. General Kainerugaba's tweet posted on Wednesday told his more than 700,000 followers that, and I'll quote him, "You have wanted me to say it forever. Okay, in the name of Jesus Christ, our God." Why is he bringing Jesus in this? But that's what he said. "In the name of all the young people of Uganda and the world, and in the name of our great revolution, I will stand for the presidency in 2026. And I think there is so much to unpack from that tweet, but let's just look at the rest of the news and then we shall come back and have that conversation. The latest about Blinken's visit, this time in Niger. The U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, has begun a visit to Niger by meeting former jihadis who have been rehabilitated through a vocational training program. Backed by U.S. funding, Mr. Blinken called it a model for the region, which has been beset by attacks by Islamic militants. It is the first ever visit to Niger by U.S. Secretary of State. The U.S. official said his arrival was a show of support for President Mohamed Bazoum, who has allowed Western militaries to operate from his country. Neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso have kicked out French troops and replaced them with Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group. The U.S. has described the Wagner as a destabilizing force and designated it an international criminal organization. And then the latest from DRC. Aid workers in Ituri province, the eastern part of the DRC, say thousands of displaced people have been arriving in the town of Beni. They are fleeing attacks by allied democratic forces, Islamist rebels in the province. More than 90 people have been killed over the past week in attacks on at least 18 villages. Attempts by the armies of the DRC and Uganda to crush the rebels have made very little progress. And in Senegal, a story that we have been keeping you up to breath with is that Ousmane Sonko, the Senegalese politician who came third in the country's last presidential election, has yesterday made his way to the court where he faced a defamation trial. His convoy was flocked by crowds of supporters Thursday morning, and police officers forced formed barricades to keep the crowds back. Sonko is being sued by Tourism Minister Mamin Yang for defamation, insult, and forgery. He also faces separate charges of rape and making death threats. Sonko has denied the charges and accused authorities of trying to silence him and his party with arbitrary. On Wednesday, police fired tear gas at legislators seeking to reach him in his Dhaka home amid growing political tensions. Member of Parliament Guy Marius Sagna and several other members of Parliament who had come to support Sonko were affected. Journalists attempting to interview the MPs were also fired at with tear gas. Sagna, who was hit in the right thigh, and images published later on social media showed him lying in a medical clinic, speaking to camera after receiving medical treatment, said condemned those act, and footage broadcast live on social media also showed a cordon of police in riot gear barring the way to Sonko's vehicle at the end of his street outside his home in the capital. And in Zimbabwe, opposition lawmaker accused of inciting public violence has lost a bid to have his case dismissed. It paves the way for his trial in the run-up to general elections scheduled for later this year. Job Sikala has been held in a maximum security prison in the capital, Harare, since June after being arrested alongside fellow members of the Citizens Coalition for Change (CCC) party. He was charged for allegedly inciting riots and that erupted when opposition supporters clashed with youth from the ruling ZANU-PF party. Harare Court magistrate ruled that there was overwhelming evidence against the Zingeza West legislator. Mr. Sikala's lawyer said they will be filing an urgent appeal against the ruling. Local media there has reported if convicted, the lawmaker will be unable to contest in the upcoming elections. A date has yet to be set for the presidential and legislative elections, but many expect that it will be in early August. Right groups and opposition parties have complained of an escalating clampdown ahead of the vote. Very typical. Okay, we go on to Burundi. The country's troop under the East African Community Regional Force, EACRF, have arrived at their base near Goma, buttressing the bloc's military mission in eastern parts of the DRC. The forces, which began deploying on Wednesday, had arrived in Birches at the Goma International Airport in North Kivu, joining other compatriots who had earlier arrived in the week. The EACRF had confirmed on Wednesday it had completed a reconnaissance mission to lay the ground for Burundians, who became the second troop contributor under the EACRF to fully deploy their forces. Kenya had deployed from November, and Uganda and South Sudan are expected to move into. And according to sources at the East Africa Community, the Burundian soldiers who landed in Goma are waiting to be deployed in Kirolirwe and Kitchanga in order to enhance free movement of persons and goods along the roads and protect the locals. The troops will cover Kitchanga, which has been in the hands of the M23 since January. Congolese Deputy Commander of the East African Force, Major General Emmanuel Kaputa, told the troops coming from Bujumbura that their mission is to participate in the unconditional withdrawal of the M23. And the latest in the power play and the influence that perhaps France is and Russia is just jostling for in Africa now, this time in Central African Republic, where on a night in early March, arsonists attacked a brewery owned by the French drinks giant Castle in Bangui, the capital of the Central African Republic, hurling petrol bombs. They set fire to beer crates stacked inside the MOCAF brewery's fortified storage yard. But this was not some random assault by firebags. Footage from security cameras says sources familiar with the incident shows a planned operation by 4 men wearing fatigues resembling those of Russian mercenary group Wagner. The attack, they say, bears the hallmarks of a ruthless campaign to carve out Russian influence in the Central African Republic, a country poor but replete with valuable forest, gold and commercial minerals. France and Russia have long been wrestling for influence in Central African Republic, a country racked by poverty and plagued by nearly decade-long civil conflict. But until this physical attack on French interest, the confrontation had been largely limited to anti-French trolling. seeking to poison relations between the Central African Republic and its former colonial power. And in December 2020, Facebook removed troll factories and other sources of fake news allegedly controlled by entities linked to Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin, as well as accounts reportedly linked to the French military. Last December, France pulled its last troops out of Central African Republic. It ended a deployment that had continued since the country's independence in 1960 and helped to stabilize it after a civil war erupted along sectarian lines in 2013. A well-informed European source said the footage bore clear signs that the assailants were a Wagner group. Okay, and the latest from Morocco is that the government says it is strengthening ties with African countries that have a clear position on the Sahrawi issue, raising the ante of soft power by Rabat to endorse its autonomy plan. Moroccan ambassador to Kenya, Abdirazak Lassel, told the East African his country is no longer interested in forcing the hand of countries to abandon the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic (SADR), but he admitted that SADR existed. A separate entity impedes economic partnerships with those with ties with Morocco. The diplomat was speaking on the background of recent efforts to undercut a recognition by SADR, which controls a portion of a Western Sahara region but runs affairs from exile in Algeria, led by the Polisario Front. For years, the Polisario Front has claimed independence of the portion it controls even though Morocco insists the region is part of its territory. But the African Union's precursor organization, the Organization of African Unity, OAU, admitted SADR as a member back in 1982. Morocco protested and quit the organization. However, Rabat returned in 2017 to the African Union. It has been lobbying countries to cut ties with SADR. The Tangier appeal, as the declaration is known, is meant to argue that SADR is not a state and hence doesn't qualify to be an AU member. They also argue that SADR administration was a mistake and should be rectified to pursue continental harmony. However, the AU says it supports self-determination of the Western Sahara people. Initially a Spanish colony, it has since 1975 been claimed by Morocco in contention with the Polisario Front after years on conflict. A peace process under the UN and OAU and now AU created a settlement plan of 1991, which would culminate in a referendum that would enable the Sahrawi people to exercise their inalienable right to self-determination. Due to lack of consensus on who actually is eligible native voter, the referendum hasn't happened yet. In 2018, the AU sitting in Mauritania established an independent entity called Troika to work with the UN Security Council as the exclusive institution to provide a credible and political solution to the Sahara dispute. And even with the establishment of this independent entity, no much clarity or progress has been achieved on this matter, and so you are now truly up to date for the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Now, the issue of Morocco and Western Sahara has been such a problematic issue for Morocco and the African Union, and that really has had Morocco having a very love-hate relationship. No wonder they don't feel like they are a part of Africa, and because of the AU's position on this matter. And AU's position on this matter has been the people from Western Sahara have every right to self-determination, and so should the necessary processes be followed, then AU will be in support of that, and that has really angered Morocco. And first, Morocco was angered the first time the African Union decided to admit the SADR, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, into the African Union. That really bugged Morocco, and so Morocco protested by quitting the African Union, and then they came back they came back again, I think, in 2017. They rejoined African Union, and since then, I think after the admission of the SADR into African Union and Morocco quitting, and that happened in 1982, Morocco realized that it was difficult for it to have influence on other member states of African Union not to accept SADR as long as it was out of the African Union, right? So I think it realized its move and its protest by leaving the African Union was very counterproductive for its aim and for what it wanted to achieve in influencing other countries to refuse, supporting or recognizing the presence of SADR in the African Union or having any form of diplomatic relations with this quote-unquote country and its leadership. It's not a country, it's not a state. They've not had a referendum, but it is an autonomous region. So it decided as a strategy, I think, to join back the African Union in 2017, not because it really cared so much, because Morocco's mind and belief and psychology, as we have seen it play out, is usually on the other. It likes being attached to the other side of the world and not necessarily in Africa. So I think you have to tap Morocco on the shoulder and remind them, hey, you are in Africa. So when you were talking, and we saw how that even played out during the World Cup, when they were very happy and they were saying, we are happy to be the first Arab country. I'm like, what? It should start with Africa and then Arab, the first African Arab country, because you were in the African continent. So you always have to remind them. Morocco and Tunisia, now seeing how President Kais Saied is also sounding, you have to always tap them on the shoulder and remind them, you're part of this continent, unless otherwise, but you make up the beautiful composition of this great map of Africa, and you can't do anything about it, basically. And I think the fact that they can't do anything about it, Morocco has not liked it, and now we see Tunisia there. But anyway, that is not the conversation we're having this morning. And so Morocco came back to returned to the African Union in 2017 and thought perhaps it would be wise, if it wanted to really make progress as far as having influence on how this matter should go, then it needed to be part of the group, and it needed to be part of the table where these decisions were being discussed, and that is the African Union. So it came back. And we've seen how Morocco has been lobbying. I remember one time Kenyan candidate Amina Mohammed was running for a certain post at the United Nations? I'm not quite sure, I'm not quite sure. And Kenya was, of course, during such positions, countries will lobby, and countries were lobbying, and Kenya was lobbying for its candidate Amina Mohammed, and Morocco was lobbying with other, against Kenya because of Kenya's position on this matter. Kenya has come out explicitly and it has declared its support. Matter of fact, SADR has their embassy here. Somaliland has their embassy here, and not in so many other countries, but they do have their embassy here. In fact, Kenya's president last week received the credential of the latest ambassador from SADR in Nairobi. So that in essence, in the diplomatic world, shows that Kenya, as much as this is not a legal entity, is not a legal move, but diplomatically Kenya has recognized SADR, as a country. The Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Kenya has recognized it diplomatically, and Kenya is willing to have that diplomatic relations with this country, state, quote unquote, because, legally it's not a country, right? So there has to be a process where they have to work out, and then they have to attain certain conditions for them to be declared a legal state. There are characteristics of a legal state, which I think Sahrawi meets. You must have a permanent population, you must have a central government, you must have what else? There are about 4 or 5 points there. So it seems to meet the characteristics or what defines a state as we know it. But on the other side, for you to be fully recognized as a state legally, then also there are some conditions that you must meet for you to be recognized at the United Nations there, and so they have to meet that. They have to meet that condition, and one of them has to be going through a referendum that I think will be organized by Morocco, and then allowing them to vote whether to stay or leave, as we saw South Sudan do. And then if the vote favors to leave, and the Western people of Sahara has decided they want to leave, then that will be it. So that is yet to happen. And so the issue have remained murky. So now, Morocco has been on a charm offensive in trying, after it came back, its readmission to the African Union, in trying to influence countries to disassociate or not to have relations with this Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. Morocco has really been trying to have influence over other countries, but that has not worked very well. So now what Morocco is saying, which I'm finding to be very suspect, and I think this is a very smart diplomatic maneuver. I don't know if the rest of the diplomats around the world or the countries will catch this sneakiness that Morocco now is trying to use, because it seems to have changed its attitude on how it's going to be approaching this matter. So let me just read through just the first sentence of that, so that you understand what I'm saying. Now, the Moroccan government says it is strengthening ties with African countries, others, and have a clear position, because usually if you were supporting, like Kenya was supporting, Kenya has been open in its support of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, and that has angered Morocco. So any time that Kenya needed a vote, even at the United Nations for anything, or Kenya was having a candidate for anything that required the vote of the African Union or members of the United Nations, Morocco would go on a campaign to make sure that a Kenyan candidate does not pass, so that it was committed, and not just for Kenya, but any other country that seems to be having warm relations with the SADR. Morocco, especially around Africa, Morocco will make sure it was campaigning against you, and you are not to have a very warm and cordial relationship. So maybe Morocco has sat and realized this strategy is not really working. This anger is not working, and this attitude we've been having and trying to force and influence, this strategy is not working. So now I think they went back to the drawing board, and what they've said is that any country that is having any sort of diplomatic working relations with the SADR, they will not have this kind of attitude and this coldness towards them. So they want to work on better relations, even with the countries that still have working relations with the SADR, of course, a position that they do not support. But if there are countries which have already taken clear positions, for instance, Kenya on this matter in support of the Western Sahara people, then what the current government of Morocco is saying is that this country will not be penalized. Morocco will not have a funny attitude towards them, and it will not affect their relationship with them, which I highly doubt. But this is a very clever way of strategizing and reworking your partnership there, Morocco. But I hope the rest of the countries will see what it is actually you're doing, because there's no way from the past you've seen that you'll just be okay, unless you're strategizing and there's something you feel that will work for you at the end of the day, and there's something that you want to achieve. So the Moroccan ambassador to Kenya, Abdulrazak Lassel, told the East Africa, which is a local publication, that his country is no longer interested in forcing the hand of countries to abandon this Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, but he admitted that the SADR existence is a separate entity, as a separate entity, impedes economic partnership with those with ties with Morocco. So he's saying this has become a wedge between us. For those who support this entity, it has created a wedge between us, and maybe this has not been very productive for Morocco. So we want to change that. And I'll quote what he said. In the past, we used to sever ties with anyone with relations with the SADR. Now we have abandoned it, and we don't want to force, but we are working with our colleagues to grow relations that benefit our people. Very smart, but it's very suspect as well. It's very smart. You know what they say, if you can't beat them, join them, and then beat them when you are with them. I think that is the Kenyan version. If you know politics, you know, and the history of Raila and how he operates. If you can't beat them, then you join them, and then you destroy them from the inside, or you have the influence when you're inside, when you know, and they can't have a stronghold on you. So that's what Morocco. This is the new tactic that Morocco is now using. That will not be very harsh. And our attitude will not be to sever ties with anyone who seeks to have relations with the SDR. Instead, you can have that relationship over there, but in the hopes that it will not impede our relationship. And so this is going to be something. When they start taking votes there or discussing this issue at the African Union, Morocco, are you going to walk out again, or are you just going to be there and stand the heat and hear what the rest of Africa, you know, is saying about this matter? But I think this is a very smart diplomatic move by Morocco, and that is what diplomacy really entails. You find ways and means of still advancing your interest without using coercion. This is soft power at play at its best, you know, because now Morocco would appear to be very diplomatic. Morocco would appear to be very, you know, to be very statesman, sort of, kinder, you know, but at the end of the day, Morocco is very clear. This is a strategy Morocco is using, and before you know it, they'll be having a cup of tea with the ambassadors and telling them, oh, by the way, this SADR, really, and slowly but surely, maybe they may be able to influence now countries on their attitudes or their relations with there's a Hawari Arab Democratic Republic, but I have to give it up for Morocco on this one, because sometimes when you have hard power, it doesn't usually work so much, because at the end of the day, when you use coercion and sanctions and things like that, and even to some extent physical aggression, sometimes it can be very expensive, because you're making very irrational decisions, but sometimes they're rational. But when you look at the price tag of the decision you're making, if Morocco was to sever its ties with Kenya, it will lose out, because as much as I don't think we export so much to Morocco, but we do import a lot of their fertilizer and other things. So if you make a decision that you have not factored in how this will affect you economically and otherwise as a country, then you get to lose a lot. You get to lose a lot, and that's why you always have to put the interests of the country first and see, okay, fine, as much as the issue of this as the Hawari Arab Democratic Republic is a concern for us, and maybe according to Morocco, they believe this is part of their territory, so anybody who is supporting this entity, as they refer to it, it is a direct threat to our sovereignty and our territorial integrity as Morocco. But also, there are other things that we could use. You know, at the end of the day, in the international system, countries fight for power and accumulation of more power. Yeah, it is power and accumulation of more power, so that there is a balance of power. Because if you come off as weak, then in the food chain, which is the international system, you get to lose out, and nobody listens to you, and you don't have a lot of influence. But if you have accumulated more power, and you find ways by which you are able to balance even this power, like we're seeing right now, China is really balancing US's power as a superpower. It's really challenging the US's position in that. And China is morphing into this country that is able really to influence world policies, to influence diplomatic relations, to influence, spheres and areas where the U.S. and its policies was very dominant, and China has come in heavy, and Russia also wants to get a hold of that. So what they are doing is, because the U.S. was very position and presence was very dominant in Asia, say in Africa, and these other places with its policies and its agenda, on democracy and other things. China is also coming out, but it's using different ways and means to also exact the same influence, and China has been very successful. So the U.S. cannot exactly boast, fine, we have a unipolar world where the U.S. is the superpower, but that is being challenged now. And that, because of that, the U.S. cannot just make a decision because it is a superpower and go with it without considering how these other powerful nations will respond to it. So because of that, there has been a balance of power where you just can't. Remember during the Cold War that happened, it went on for 40 years. Immediately after the Second World War in 1945, I think the Cold War started in 1946 and went all till the early 90s. The end of 80s and early 90s, there where it ended, and the USSR was divided, and all those things happened. It's a long history. I'll not get into it. The reason why it was referred to as a Cold War, because the world had just come out of the World War, where physical aggression was used. Countries attacked each other literally, and exhibited their might and power and their sophisticated weapons and all that, and a lot of destruction. So the world learned, and these countries learned. So when the Cold War was a war about ideologies, communism and capitalism, with capitalism led by the US and its allies, and communism led by the USSR and its allies as well. Okay, so it went on for a while, and at that time, the reason why the world could not go back again to another war, another physical war, like it had been experienced in the World War I and World War II. World War I that happened in 1919, I think it took about 4 years, from 1914 to ended in 1919, and the World War II that ended in 1945 is because there was a balance of power. Because before and leading up to the Second World War, world power was concentrated in Europe, between France, Britain, Russia, Germany, and Germany was problematic then, and it was a worry. It was a factor that was worrying, because it is one of the key reasons why World War I happened, and it is one of the key reasons why World War II happened, Germany. So power was concentrated so much in Europe. So after the World War II, power shifted, because all the countries that participated highly in this war were left depleted, their economies were bad and all that, but US stood out, and it had the last of that destruction when it, the nuclear bombing in Japan that happened, that ended, the World War II. And so that is how US emerged as a superpower. But before that, power was concentrated among key states in Europe, and that's why you find that the international system is quite Eurocentric, because that is the genesis of how we know the international system for it to be the way it is today. And so the reason why they could not engage in another physical war is because this time there was also another superpower or another stronger power in the name of USSR. And so there was fear there. So the US could not just attack, and the USSR could not just attack, because they know there's another country and another entity there that also could match its power. So it's important to have that balance of power. And for you to have that balance of power, then you must accumulate as much power as possible by making sure you have a very strong army. Like you see the way Russia is flexing its army and its capabilities there in Ukraine, and the world is just sitting there watching, because they know they can't directly engage with Russia. That will create other problems that the rest of us don't want. But it's very important. So Morocco is using very interesting ways to ensure that it's able to still advance its interest, but this time it's choosing not to be very aggressive with its approach. Instead, it's choosing to use soft powers, which sometimes may take long for you to see the results, but also slowly but surely it's meant to change ideas, it's meant to change perspective, it's meant to change opinions, it's meant to influence, but in a very soft and easy way that sometimes you don't even realize. You don't even like, and that's what we see, with the movies and the cultures and these other things that Museveni is really fighting, and other things that we see is quite westernized as Africans, but they use it in a form of soft power. So before you know it, we'd rather watch the movies from the US, from Hollywood, than enjoy a movie from, say, Nigeria, because they have been successful in using this as a tool of influence for us to, in terms of soft power, for us to really get into wanting and longing for their culture, and just being engaged in that. And so they've been successful in changing our perceptions and how we consume things and information. That is part of diplomacy, and the West has been very successful, especially US and some parts of Europe, in doing this. And they will come in and support some cultural programs in the communities, and they'll come in and support HIV and AIDS programs, and teenage mothers going back to schools and things like that. These things are wonderful, but you have to understand they just don't happen in a vacuum. This is a bigger plan and a bigger vision, and how at the end of the day they'll be able to achieve their foreign policy out here in the continent. Okay? So what I'm saying is, I've said all of this to say, finally I get to the point, that Morocco has realized the diplomatic strategies it was using is not working, so they have to change tact. And that is just one of the characteristics of the international system. It is dynamic, it is not static, because the new things that come up, the new challenges that come up, they're called emerging issues. So a country has to be in a position where it's malleable, you're able to adapt and see how well to still achieve your foreign policy by not changing the end goal, but perhaps changing your approach. And that is what we're seeing now happening. Okay, I feel like I need a break, but let's just go on. I have a couple of minutes remaining, and then okay, now let's look at this proxy war that is also looming in of course we know several proxy wars that are playing out in the continent. But let's look at this one that is taking a different twist in Central African Republic. The Russian Wagner Group that now has been confirmed to be working very closely to the Putin administration, has been also advancing its influence around Africa, and it has had specific targets on especially the interest, countries where especially France has had some interest, and a lot of these countries are its former colonies, right? And one of these countries is Central African Republic, and I think I've been giving you updates of what has been happening in Central African Republic, and I think I did that just even the other week. I was talking to you about Bozize, and I just gave you a brief history on how even the current leadership came into power, and we've been tackling this country every now and then. And by now you know that even the Russian mercenaries are the ones who are leading the presidential security apparatus in the Central African Republic. And they have been very strategic in how they have been helping in influencing French's influence in the country, and sort of using ways to undermine France's influence in the Central African Republic. And they have been quite successful in that regard. So now there is an attack that happened a few days ago in early March, And the arsonist attacked a brewery, a French brewery, where the drinks giant Castel is based in Bangui. That is the capital city of Central African Republic. And according to the investigations and the CCTV reports, these people who were seen throwing these bombs into this manufacturing company, French manufacturing company, said allegedly to be from the Wagner group, these Russian mercenaries. And there is evidence, according to France, that shows this. So this is another, this is another proxy war that we're seeing out playing. And it has been on strategy and influence, but now when you see physical attacks on infrastructure belonging to one country is concerned, now that is the point you get worried. Because now they've been bringing the chaos all the way from Europe, transporting it, importing it into our countries, and we don't see it. And you know what really amazes me, what I really can't understand, honestly, is that as much as I do understand, we do have a responsibility, and we are sovereign countries, and we should deal with any country or any entity, as Morocco would put it, referring to the SADR, any entity, right? As long as it serves our interest and it is for our good. Like, no doubt, be it China, Russia, US, UK, a sovereign country has every right to do that, to form and to nurture these kinds of relationships that are beneficial. But what I don't understand is, are these leaders blind to some of these allegations that are made against, say, a group like the Wagner mercenary group? Have they not seen these allegations that they are the ones who are also part of recruiting and on the forefront of this war in Ukraine, as they've been accused of human rights abuses? And the former members have come out and made really scary testimonies about that if you are a member, because you're recruited, and others have been recruited by force in these groups, and if you even attempt to leave, they literally put your head against the wall and it is smashed with a sledgehammer. They get treated like they're ruthless like that. And there has been some reports of, and some bodies of Africans that have been returned in the continent who perhaps were serving jail time in Russia, and for them, they were removed from prison. They were told, come fight for us, and after we are successful, we'll give you a clemency. You'll be released, a parole. You'll be released. You'll be set free. So they've been recruiting jailbirds. They've been recruiting other people, and others have been forced into fighting this war. So because of these allegations, some of these allegations could be having some truth in them, some not, because it's also a part of the propaganda that we see also from the West. So I think we should be very careful in how we receive and consume and how we receive this information. Can't these countries really take a pause? And the same way a lot of countries have decided to not take a position in this war, also just sit back and not involved, especially with an entity that we're seeing a lot of news and information come out about it that perhaps might not be for the good of our country, and then investigate and look around and see, and then decide how to associate. So now, because Central African Republic is really, really rich in natural resources, as when we were talking about Central African Republic, I told you it has one of the purest diamonds in the world. So that means it's the premium price you get for it. And the actors that have been involved in Central African Republic, and of course gold and oil, have ensured that this chaos, they've created this chaos within the communities, they've sponsored these communal fightings. They do all they can to ensure that they're able to do what they're doing under the cover. And of course, when a country is always at war with itself, it affects even the accountability, and it affects attention that is supposed to be given to key places like, where these minerals are being mined. And Central African Republic is now another hot spot, and I'm afraid we will only see this conflict, only go up. It will only increase, because when you see now these attacks starting to happen and this aggression starting to happen, and Russia is being accused of allegations. The mercenaries are being accused, not Russia as a country or as an entity, but the Wagner group, the mercenary group, is being accused of carrying out these arson attacks. Then this is a clear violation, and this is a clear aggression. This is a clear violation. So I'm just worried. And these paramilitaries have been in the country, in Central African Republic, since 2018, when they were brought in to buttress Central African Republic's beleaguered military. Their numbers were increased by hundreds in 2020 to thwart rebels who were advancing on the capital as the presidential election unfolded. The UN rights expert, as well as NGOs and Western capitals, have accused Wagner mercenaries of carrying out crimes against civilians. The group also operates in Mali. But France also suspects Touadéra of buying, that is the president of Central African Republic, of buying Wagner's support against rebel insurgencies by providing it access to diamonds and the country's other natural resources, which I think there's been proof a little bit about that. So you're going to provide me security, and you're going to make sure that I stay president. Because, there had been coups and counter coups in Central African Republic. I was explaining to you the other day when I was explaining to us who Bozize is and his involvement in the instability in Central African Republic, how he came to power, the coups that preceded him, who he removed, and after him he was also removed in a coup, and so on and so forth. So there's always a potential for another coup in Central African Republic. And so President Touadéra has a founded concern about that. His worries are actually quite legitimate over his being in power. And so because of that, he invited the Russian mercenaries to ensure that he stays president, and the allegations are that he can allow them to access some of the areas that are rich in these minerals. And because France has also been benefiting from these minerals, so of course France is a threat to Russia's interest and what it stands to benefit. So what is now going to happen is we have to get rid of France by all means necessary. And if it means we burn down their companies and we know all these, French has its multinational companies around the world, like the Total Oil and others, and in its former colonies it has more other multinational companies. And so this company is a breweries, okay? So it was attacked, it was burned, part of it was burned down. So these are very dangerous maneuvers, and such acts really act to create more instability and more insecurity. And what these countries are looking at are their own interests. At the end of the day, these insecurities and these conflicts and these instabilities only get to affect the people of the Central African Republic. While they get the minerals out of the country, they'll get the wealth out of the country, and they really don't care about the human collateral that gets to shoulder and bear this burden at the end of the day. And what I started by saying I don't understand is how our leaders can be so blind to the interest of these foreign powers that has nothing to do with the benefit of our people, with the benefit of the people that are elected and put them in these positions. They have nothing. They don't care. And how can they be so blind that a lot of these foreign entities really don't mean well? Yeah? You're having these people protect you at what cost? At what cost? Must you be in power at whatever cost? So this is a worry, and it is a worry that our leaders are quite blinded. I don't really care to look at issues and interrogate these people and interrogate these groups before they're able to really engage with them and see what does the country stand to lose. Is it a bigger price to pay? And it is a bigger price to pay, because these proxy wars, they don't care. They don't care. Your people will be the casualties. French, Russia, they'll come play out their proxy war here it will damage your country, it will damage your people. It will only fuel the conflict further and the instability in the country. So it's not for your good, President Odera. I wish you would just open your eyes and see. But we seem to have some blind leaders. I think I've said enough for right now. That's enough. Of course, there are some other. Oh, hold on. We have to talk about Muhonzi. I'll do that in 2 minutes. I'll try. I think this guy will stage a coup against his father. I don't know why I always joke about that, but I have a feeling you can see how he is power hungry. He really is. And from his tweets that he deleted, he had another tweet yesterday, you can tell this is a person who is also fed up with his father's leadership. And you can tell this is a person who feels he has better ideas that could take Uganda further than his dad can. So the son of Uganda's President, Yoweri Museveni, has deleted a tweet announcing that he will be standing for the presidency in 2026. Muhonzi Kainerugamba, an army general, is notorious for his controversial tweets, which have led to diplomatic spurts and reprimands from his father, who sacked him as a commander of land forces last year for boasting about how easy it will be to invade us here in Kenya. Now, the tweeting general has also not hidden his ambition to take over the top job from his 78-year-old dad, who has led Uganda since 1986. General Kainerugamba's tweet, posted on Wednesday, told his more than 700,000 followers, and I'll quote him, "You have wanted me to say it forever. Okay." So he said, "In the name of Jesus Christ, my God, in the name of all the young people of Uganda and the world, and in the name of our great revolution, I will stand for the presidency in 2026. Well, President Museveni, I don't know if he has come out outrightly to announce that he shall be running for elections in 2026. Instead, what we saw is a bunch of nurses and doctors kneeling and crying and begging him to run. I think we saw that ridiculousness play out here last year. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But he's not come out outright to tell us if he will be running. But I think the expectation is he will run, okay? Because there's a time he said in an interview several years ago, he said at this point he's not working. As long as his grandchildren and his family is okay, he doesn't care what everybody else thinks. Yeah, he's a president. He's there to stay. And of course, for the people who are benefiting from his government, of course, we'll support that, because they'd rather maintain the status quo, because they still get to benefit and have whatever it is that they get from the leadership of President Museveni. But his son has become very increasingly, I think, uncomfortable with his father's leadership. I think at this point it is safe to assume that. And he's every now and then he makes reference to the younger Ugandans, to a younger leadership and all that, and what that might mean for the future of Uganda. And as we know, the father is not very young. He's 78. He's been there for a while, 36 plus years. And so Kainerugamba really believes this is his time, and he should be taking over from his dad. The question is, will his dad endorse him for the next presidential elections, or will he try to use his influence in the army to even stage a coup against his dad? At this point, I think that should be taken very seriously. And President Museveni should be worried about his son. I know, I might be sounding very far-fetched. It might be completely out of the blues and out of order even to sit here and say that. But this is a person who has exhibited. He has hunger for power. He has hunger. He cannot wait to get his hands on the top leadership of Uganda. And I'm surprised he didn't mention his mother here. He mentioned Jesus Christ. He mentioned the young people. He keeps insisting on the young people of Uganda. So the last time he had this kind of tweet, he said, he wanted to make his mother proud. And I said, wow, this sounds like a personal enterprise, except it is a country. So you can you imagine my son running for presidency to make me proud? I would want for him to run, to serve. I think that will be a great motivation. But for his motivation, I guess he's a mama's boy. I want to assume from the comments he's been making, he really wants to run to make his mother proud. He has said that before, not his dad. I don't see him mentioning his dad. Instead, from reading, in between the lines of some of these tweets he's been making, I think he's also fed up of his father's leadership. And he really believes that Uganda needs another leadership that perhaps is alive to the issues of the people, and especially the young people who cannot exactly connect. As much as a good number vote for him, but they can't identify with this leader. He does not speak their language. I know he tries to rap sometimes, he tries to do all these things to endear himself to these young people, but he can't do it, maybe in a way that Kainerugaba feels he can do. He thinks he can do a better job than that. Yeah, and maybe the young people in Uganda right now are quite illusioned, and he's feeling he could be that person, that leader that will close in the gap, that will effectively address the issues that are affecting them. And the father may not be doing that well right now. So President Museveni, you need to leave the LGBTQ community alone. Stop focusing so much on that. I know you've said these Europeans also have some very weird behaviors. They marry their cousins. And so you're saying we should also sanction them because of things like that. They can't be marrying their cousins and then they're out here telling us to, for the same sexes to marry each other. So according to how they even operate, that is a taboo against Africa. So because of these weird cultures, we should also put sanctions. I love the way he's just an on the surface guy, and he says what he thinks, and his opinion in some of these things and his understanding is quite something, President Museveni. So your son is saying, maybe you don't understand even that matter very well. You don't understand how young people understand this matter very well, and maybe how they would wish for this matter to be handled, because you are quite disconnected. I'm not saying that is one of the issues, but he's been saying the young people are yearning for new leadership. So, sir, if I were you, I'd be very, very wary, and I'll be very worried about that child of yours who really cannot wait for you either to die or to remove you in power, because he will. I think from his tweets, he wants to get to power, and you were what is standing between him and that wonderful seat that you're sitting on, you've been sitting on for over 36 years. And he's feeling that he really can't wait. A child, when you're baking and they see the cake, maybe you've taken it from the oven and it's sitting up there and you're telling them, wait for it to get cold and then you can have it. Otherwise, you'll burn your fingers, but they're just there. They can't wait to put their fingers on it. That's your son right now. And you're standing in his way to the top office of Uganda, which he has expressed in numerous occasions is something that he would want to do. So be very, very careful, because I think if history has taught us anything in this continent, is that anything is possible. And for those who want to achieve power, Paul Biya killed his uncle and disposed his uncle. Okay? So nothing can be overruled. Nothing can ever be overruled in politics. So you need to be careful. And he's a mama's boy, so you know how we are with our sons. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading too much, but I think that is something that should not be swept under the rug, and for you to just keep changing his positions and telling him to delete these tweets. No, you should start interrogating these tweets and understand exactly what your son is trying to tell you. Okay? I think. All right. Thank you so much for your time. It is almost noon. We started just a few minutes past 11 a.m. Too much talking. I'll see you again here on Sunday, God willing. Enjoy your weekend. My name is Miriam Gutta. Bye-bye, and thank you so much for watching.